Jaqual's Story Part 4, Finding Love. August 17, 2014. Sue speaks. Dear Jaqual, I have not contacted you in a few days. Yes, I have been busy, but I also know that you are going into battle. I always hide my eyes when I watch movies or shows when the battle begins. However, I have always been interested in the military. Likely that interest is because of my unconscious memories of you and Miter. With that said, I am ready to ask you to continue the story of your going into battle. Jaqual speaks. I speak to you again from within the third, yellow doorway of becoming a spiritual warrior. I have found within myself the energy field of being a spiritual warrior. Now I will share my experience serving as a spiritual warrior. I left off telling the 13 members under my new command how to transmute into light body. Once we all united via our light bodies and via the unity consciousness we had already established, we were ready to confront the Draconians. There were only a few of us, and we had to outsmart and outfight about 100 Dracs. However, we had two things that were impossible for these warrior Dracs. We had a multidimensional connection with our own light body, and we had a deep unity consciousness with each other. Armed with our invisible weapons, we set out to rescue our people. My ship was far superior to the others, so I took the lead. We chose a route that was out of the normal flight plans, so that we arrived at the Draconian base from a direction they would not suspect. As far as we knew, the Dracs thought that everyone from our colony was dead, and anyone returning to our world would have no way to determine what had happened or how to find the missing people. We hoped that they would become lazy with that illusion. However, laziness was not a common Draconian trait. On the other hand, they greatly enjoyed a raucous celebration after battle, which would distract them, we hoped. Our plan was to beam up our people into our ships, as any one ship could not hold them all. But first we had to locate where they were in the Draconian camp. We decided to use our telepathic connection with the man with whom we had been telepathically communicating. Again, he was a great help and told us exactly where to find them. He also told us that we had to act immediately, as they were to be shipped off the next day. We had to get the Dracs off the planet and in our ships. We needed a distraction, which would have to be me. My ship was an object they would recognize as special and would follow me in order to capture it. As I bussed over their encampment, I could see them running to their ships. They did not want to shoot me down, as they wanted this new form of spaceship intact. After all, there were many of them and only one of me. Thus, I enticed them into the air, leaving only a few Dracs to guard their prisoners. Knowing there was help nearby, the prisoners began their own plans to subdue the few remaining guards. One skill that we Ontarians had, which no Draconians possessed, was the ability to move into our higher fourth-dimensional form. Since that dimension was invisible to the Dracs' perception, one by one their captives blinked out of the vision of the guards. The Draconian ego had stumped them. They did not consider that a band of wounded and beaten slaves could actually transport themselves into a frequency beyond their vision. Now that they knew they could be rescued, the invisible prisoners could easily outmaneuver their captors. The unseen prisoners took the guards' weapons and used against them. Soon the remaining guards were all dead, and we began beaming up our people. Unfortunately, one of the guards had called for help, and we knew that more Dracs would soon return to their base. We needed another distraction, which again was my ship. I started shooting at the Drac vessels, then took off in hopes they would follow me. I chose this tactic as a lure to get their attention. Then, while our other ships raced back to our planet with our people, I could lead them in a different direction. I knew that I would likely be killed, but it was a good death. And, since I had already cheated death, I assumed that I was lucky to be able to go down as a protective warrior rather than a wounded child. As soon as I saw the Draconians on my sensors, I took off in the opposite direction of the ships with our people. The Dracs were no fools, so some of them split off in the direction of our planet. I went after them and was able to take out about half of those ships before I was hit. Fortunately, I had given the others enough time to get to the secret wormhole we had discovered on our way to the Draconian camp. The ships turned back toward their camp thinking that they could always return to our planet again. I knew this was true, so I had to destroy them all. My fight was quite valiant, but eventually I was shot down and I was taken prisoner. I had set the auto-destruct on the ship, so those who remained to take my ship were blown up along with it. Unfortunately, I had been taken from the ship, so I could not perish with it. I will not discuss what occurred to me while being their prisoner, but you can well imagine that it was not pleasant. When I wouldn't provide any information, they decided to put an implant into my brain so that they could always track me. Worse yet, the implant blocked my ability to return to my higher frequencies of self. Then they left me in a cell in the hopes that someone would try to rescue me, so they could be captured as well. Of course, that someone was my dearest friend Commander Maltese. With the implant in my brain, I could not communicate via fifth-dimensional telepathy, so I could not warn him that my imprisonment was a trap. However, he could track me. I do not know how long I had been a prisoner, but it was long enough for my friends to come back for me after our people were returned to the planet. While on our planet, Maltese found the specification of the new ship, right where I had told him they would be. From the information, the Ontarian had been able to put a cloaking device on Commander Maltese's ship. Much to my surprise, CM, as we all called him, was able to beam me out of my cell. Once on his ship, I warned him of my implant. He was not surprised, but very sad that he could not take me home. However, he had fought the Dracs for decades and had prepared for the probability of my implant. "Before we came to your rescue," said CM, "we found a distant planet, and created a fifth-dimensional dome that the Dracs cannot penetrate. We have left a ship there for you so that you are not trapped on that planet. We know that even with your inner tracking device you can outsmart and outfight the Dracs. With a safe place to hide, you can keep up the fight while we relocate our community to a new location. Once that is accomplished, we will find a way to remove or disable your implant and return to take you home. Until then, you will be safe." We silently flew to the planet, which was out of both Draconian and Ontarian territory. CM landed just outside the fifth-dimensional dome and guided me through a passageway through which I could enter my safe zone. I felt blind and crippled that I could not differentiate the fifth-dimensional dome from the surrounding areas while limited to my 3D perceptions. Once inside the dome, CM said, "Our people are forever grateful for your sacrifice, and we will not let you down. We will find a way to help you and return to take you home." With those final words, my dear friend said goodbye for now, as he embraced me, returned to his ship and flew off. I was alone. As far as I knew, there was no one else on the planet, but I was safe and had the rest of my life to heal. Sue. I now return to a section of Jaqual's story that I received in 2007. I continued to fight for several more decades, but without any passion. I fought hard with no fear of dying, but it was as if I was protected and nothing could kill me. I even became foolish, which only crashed my ship and stranded me on an isolated planet for many years. It was during those years in which I was completely alone on that barren planet that I began my ascension. I had to eat simply, as there were only a few roots and plants that were edible. However, there was enough water and many hot springs in which I spent hours reflecting on my life. There was enough animal life that I could eat, but I was so tired of killing that I would rather starve than kill another living thing. Fortunately, the plant life that I found was sufficient, barely for my health. However, it left me with little vitality, and I spent most of my days in quiet contemplation or on casual exploratory hikes. Since I had also traveled more than any person needed to, I stayed close to my crash site, as well as the relative comfort of my ship. The communication device was damaged almost beyond repair. Unfortunately, with my implant I was unable to expand my consciousness into the fifth dimension to communicate via telepathy. On the other hand, I was able to repair the radio enough to send out SOS messages. Unfortunately, the range of this message was very small, and could be heard by the enemy as well as by my own troops. Hence, I did not use it often. In fact, I only used it when my instincts told me that there were no enemy ships in range. Yes, I had lost my ability to communicate via telepathy, but living so close to the land had honed my animal communications, so that my instincts were at a very heightened state. The long hours of contemplation and living as one with nature continually awakened me to the inner voice that had been hidden behind my constant cry of guilt and torment that I had not saved my community. That voice calmly and lovingly reminded me again and again that I was just a child when the Drex came to our town, and there was nothing that I could have done to save them. In fact, the voice reminded me that had I not pretended to be dead, there would have been no one alive to rescue the survivors from a long, horrible life of slavery. But still, I lived in remorse and guilt about the death of my mother. No, the voice reminded me. Your mother was happy to leave and return to the higher dimensions to be with your father. In fact, she was going to do so soon anyway because you were old enough to be left with the families of the town. Nonetheless, it still took years of this inner conversation before I could accept what my inner voice was telling me. Knowing that my mother was planning to leave me because she missed her higher dimensional life was helpful. Slowly, my grief lessened, and I began to experience a freedom from the constant burden of guilt and self-remorse. Finally, I began to realize that my life had been a good one. I had more than fulfilled my obligation as a warrior to protect the colonies from the draconian destruction, and I had been a good leader and loyal friend. Eventually, I began to have dreams that I was walking through a long hallway. I knew, of course, that these dreams represented my entry into the Temple of Remembering, but try as I might, I could never get to the door. In every dream, I saw the doorway at the end of the hall, taunting me to open it. But when I tried to walk towards the door, my feet would not move. I knew then that I could not make this journey in my dream state. I would need to face whatever self-made barriers were left before I could proceed. Since it only took a few hours each day to collect my food and maintain my survival, I had a great deal of time to search inside myself. At another time in my life, I would have scouted the entire planet, which turned out to actually be an asteroid. However, at this time in my life, I wanted only to see inside of myself, finally. It was then that I began to have dreams, meditations and reflections, all of which had a similar theme. I was being guided back through all the darkness and fear of my long life. Memory after memory of my experiences of sadness, anger, and fear were slowly healed with the expanding light of understanding, forgiving, accepting, and loving myself. Surprisingly, I began to live in a state of thanksgiving for the peace and simple joy of finally healing a long life of pain. Wave after wave of pain was released. As I forgave myself, my ancient pain was replaced with thanksgiving for having the time and space to take this inner journey, as well as the wisdom to choose to take it. Bit by bit, fear was replaced with love, anger was replaced by gratitude, and sorrow was replaced with joy. I was living a simple, quiet life. My inner peace made the cold night warm, and the hot days cool. The simple food began to taste delicious, the ruined ship became my loving home, my walks became moving meditations, and the hot mineral pools became nirvana. As my mind healed, the many bruises, cuts, and minor injuries of my crash also healed. My mind became clear and free of negativity, my body grew strong and healthy, and my heart opened fully to the simple joys of everyday life. When the inner voice told me it was time to turn on the SOS beacon, I almost refused to do so. No, the voice repeated. You must trust me on this and follow my advice. As I continued to resist, I realized that this was a final initiation to see if I could trust my inner self. Just as I had to accept that I was not crazy for talking to myself, I had to accept that my inner voice was a higher octave of the multidimensional self that I had believed the implant had taken from me. The persistency of my inner voice finally led me to turn on the beacon. To my surprise, what I found was not a ship rescuing me, but another ship that was in need of my rescuing them. Just in time, I turned on my communications, so that I could direct the damaged ship to my location. No, I thought. Now my wonderful refuge will be ruined. Little did I know just how wrong I was. It has been many cycles since Sylvania landed her damaged ship on my wilderness home. Because I had finally listened to my inner direction and turned on my communications, I was able to give her the coordinates to my location. The coordinates had not been a part of my SOS message, for fear the Drax would receive it. I had to hike an entire day to find her location, but she was not too injured. With my renewed strength and stamina, I was able to easily carry her back to my encampment. She too was an Ontarian and was able to give me news of our home. It wasn't until then that I began to miss it. However, my homesickness ended quickly when I began to fall in love with Sylvania. Yes, I, Jaqual, fell in love. It was Sylvania's love that showed me how to walk the hallways, for she walked them with me. Channeled by Suzanne Lee. This is the last message from the past that I can find from Jaqual, but I know there is more that I will receive in my now. By moving through the fourth, green doorway, Jaqual remembered how he found love. Also, by following Jaqual's story of being stranded on the planet, I realized why it took me so long to remember about his messages. I feel that we are all on the same inner journey as Jaqual's. It is important that we take time to be with Gaia's land, eat simply, meditate every day, and find our own simple joys of being alive. We can become so caught up in the battles of 3D life that we forget that we are much more than our earth vessel and what we do in our physical world. Finding who we truly are is vital at this point of our personal and planetary ascension. We all lost our ability to return to the higher expressions of our multidimensional self when we were born into our physical body. Hence, we too need to focus on our own inner voice and the voice of our planet, to regain our innate abilities that were taken from us by a society largely led by draconians in human disguise. Jaqual's story came into my awareness in this now to remind us all that we are the masters of our destiny. Hence, we all can find love of life by choosing to go inside to heal our pain and regain our love. SuzanneLeePhD.blogspot.com